Hey everyone, welcome to Play Hooky with me. My name is Roz, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing how to make a finger knit baby blanket. Recently there's been a resurgence of interest in a chunky finger knit blanket that I made, and I've been asked two questions nearly daily regarding it. First, can you use this yarn to make a baby blanket? And second, can you use smaller yarn with this technique? So firstly, no, I do not recommend this jumbo yarn for baby blankets. In my opinion, it's way too thick and it's a safety hazard, so I would stay clear of that. But absolutely, yes, you can use smaller yarn to make a finger knit blanket, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on in this video. The smaller yarn is trickier to work with, so I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks to make the process less stressful, hopefully, things that have helped me, as well as show you some suggestions on yarns. Be sure to check the description box below. I'll have all the details on the yarn I've used and how much yarn I recommend for the different sizes of baby blankets. So let's go ahead and talk about the yarns that would be suitable for baby blankets. I would highly recommend this Bernat baby blanket yarn. It's a super bulky number 6 and requires an 8mm hook, just to give you some ideas on gauge if you can't get this particular brand. The reason I like this yarn so much is because it's the same fiber as the chunky blanket that I made. It's 100% polyester, washer and dryer safe, and it has a tooth to it that's easy to work with. When I say tooth, it's kind of dry, so as you're making the loops with your fingers, it stays in place a lot more than if you work with these softer yarns that I'm going to be talking about. The next yarn that I would recommend is a size higher than the number 6 here that you see. It's considered a jumbo 7, which is surprising that it's in the same category as the chunky yarn that I used. As you can see, there's a vast difference in the size. You may also be interested in using these more velvety styles. You can see the sheen on it. It's gorgeous and it would be so soft and snuggly. The only issue again is that it is going to be very slippery and the loops are going to try to pull out on you as you're working. All the details regarding the yarn that you see here I've added in the description box below. So to get started with your finer yarn, you're going to do the same thing that you would do with a regular chunky blanket. You're going to start with your foundation chain. Now for this particular yarn that you see here, it's a super bulky 6. So I think I average about 16 to 18 chains per foot, just for gauge if you're working with the same kind of yarn. For this demonstration, I'm just going to work up 15 chains. I'm going to start with my slip knot. Just wrap the yarn around your fingers in a cross, pull the yarn through the middle, and pull to form a slip knot. This is also going to form your very first chain. I like to make my loops about 1 inch long. To make our foundation chain, it's very easy to do. We're just going to be threading the yarn in through the previous chain or loop to form the next loop. So here is loop 1. Just pull the yarn through the middle to form your next loop. Again, these are about 1 inch long. Don't make it too tight on yourself. It's going to be very hard to work in if you go smaller than 1 inch. Try your best to keep the loops in the same position as you move across. It'll be much easier to work in when you get to the end. Just kind of keep it in the palm of your hand as you're working. Once you have your chains ready, the big tip here is whatever your chain count is, that's how many loops you're going to be forming from here on out. So for example, for me, I've made 15 chains. I'm going to be forming the next row with 15 loops. And just like with the regular chunky blanket, we're just going to be forming the loops in the previous chain. So take that last loop, thread your yarn through it, pull up to form your first loop for your next row. And again, I like to make these about 1 inch high. Now the trick with the yarn, and this is what this video is all about, is dealing with the slippage. You don't want this previous loop to pull out. So what I like to do is put your finger into that loop. As you're making your next loop in the next chain, it's going to pull around your finger and stay in place. This is a bit fiddly at first, but once you get the hang of it, it is really easy. Working into the next chain, pinch the yarn through and pull. And as you can see, I've held the previous loop in place. And just go along, putting your finger in that loop before you work on the next. Pinch through that top of that next chain there and pull your yarn through. If you're having difficulty with this, you've probably made your chains too tight. Go ahead and just start over and make sure those chains are a little bit looser so you can get your fingers into them. Try to be as consistent as you can with the height of your loops. I hope you can see how the fingers are laying inside of the previous loops there. And once you've reached the end, go ahead and make sure that you have the same amount of loops as you did with your chains, and then you're ready for the next row. Okay, when you start a new row, now you want to focus on this loop here, the one next to the one you're going to work in, because that is the one that has a tendency to pull out as you're working on it. So just keep an eye on this one. Just take your time to form that first loop. With this yarn, it's not as much of a problem as it is with the velvet yarn. If you're working with the velvet yarn, just kind of hold your finger over the top of it as you're making that initial loop there. And now we're doing the same thing. Just put your finger into that loop, keeping an eye on this loop. You can kind of hold it with your fingers if you like, and then work. There we go. Just keep a close eye. If it does pull out on you, it will look something like this. Just take a crochet hook or your finger and just pull it back through. Another tip with the crochet hook, if you've made your loops kind of small and it's hard for your fingers to fit in this smaller yarn, just take a crochet hook and feed the yarn through that way. It doesn't matter what size crochet hook you use. I have a size 8 here, and I find that works really well. I just kind of hold it and thread it through. Your loops are going to twist on you a little bit. Don't worry about it. Don't let that stress you out. Just make sure that the sides are parallel to each other before you enter or make your next loop, and everything will be totally fine. And that's all there is to it. Like I said, with this drier yarn, it doesn't slip and slide on you too much. It's just a little bit fiddly. And just keep going. It's another row done. And move your yarn over and continue. This is really lovely to work with. It's bigger than the 6, it's a jumbo 7, but it is a little bit more fiddly to work with as far as it wanting to slip out on you. But once you get used to fitting your fingers in between these loops, it really takes away that issue, and I think you're really going to enjoy working on this yarn once you get the hang of that. And just like before, if you have an issue where the loop does come out, if you have something that looks like this, don't worry about it. You can either take your finger and thread it back through, or you can take a crochet hook and thread it through. See how that happens? It just easily just starts a domino effect. Just don't panic, just take your time and then get back in action. When you've worked your complete blanket, you want to do just like the regular finger knit blanket. You want to make your final loops a little bit bigger than what you were working on. So for example, with this blanket, mine were about 1 inch high. I want to make them about 1.5 inches high. And that's because we're going to be feeding them into each other to finish the blanket. You want to work towards the active yarn. So for example, here is my active yarn and it's on my right side. So I want to finish working from left to right. If my active yarn was finished over here on the right, let's say for example like this, let's say the yarn was over here when I finished, then I would want to be making my final round from right to left. So take your first loop, taking the one next to it, thread it through, and continue this all the way across. Next loop, go through the one behind it and over. Go through and pull. through and pull all the way across. Final one. And you will have one loop left, and you can take your yarn and create a slip knot to finish. And then you can take your yarn and just feed it or weave it into the sides. And for added assurance, you can go ahead and stitch it with a little bit of thread. And if you want to see more details on how to do that, that is in my original finger knit blanket video. For a baby blanket, you're going to need at least 2 skeins of yarn. So you are going to be needing to join 2 skeins together. It's super easy to do. You're just going to be doing 2 ties instead of 1. And this forms a magic knot. It is not going to come undone, I promise you. Take the working yarn from the blanket that you're working on and your new skein. Put the ends parallel to each other with the ends on opposite sides. We're just going to be tying them to each other. So we're going to take this end and tie it to this strand of yarn and this end and tie it to this strand of yarn. You're just tying like a shoelace. So we're just going to wrap. Just imagine you're working on tying something, just a normal tie. One. Do the same thing with this tip onto the bottom strand of yarn. Just tie it like a shoelace. And then take these 2 ends and pull together to form your magic knot. You can clip this as tight or close as you want. It's not going to come undone, no matter how much you tug on it. I hope you found this video useful. Like I said, this is really lovely to work with. You just need to be a little bit patient and make sure to utilize the rest of your fingers to anchor things down as you're working, and you should be good to go.